I know I've joked around before with being like coming up here and saying it's brave being a joke, but seriously, as a first timer doing pedophile jokes, that is fucking brave. That is a fucking shit. I know that from experience. That takes balls. That is all right. Are you ready for your next act?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Please make a loud noise for Andrew Fernbach.
As if there was no doubt in the room with the oversized novelty timer, I am in fact a scientist. Yes! I feel like I'm at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, except I'm a scientist. It's like, hello, I'm Andrew, I'm a scientist. It's been 20 years since my first paper. But anyway, I'm not just any regular scientist. I am in fact a legacy scientist. Yes, my grandfather and grandmother were scientists. And I know that your first question is, oh my goodness, Andrew, what did your grandfather bring to science? And the answer is quite surprising. He was a worldwide expert on Winkles, which is, oh yes, I can see from the surprised looks in this. Some of you may know what a Winkle is. It's a tiny little critter that sits on a rock, kind of like a barnacle. Imagine a barnacle, but less macho, and you're pretty much there. In fact, incidentally, barnacles have the longest genitals of any organism, because since you spend your life attached to a rock, how are you going to get yourself a Tinder date? So their genitals have to do the lifting. So it's like the next house along. But anyway, that is not the topic of this conversation. Back to our wonderful Winkle friends, but still in the bedroom, is that way back in the 60s, they could not get Winkles to breed in captivity. Those little critters, no matter what, even though the science community was spending money on wave machines and rocks and seawater and tanks and regulators, nothing. These little Winkles kept their little Winkle legs together, no hanky and or panky. The science community was at a loss. And what did my grandfather, my innovative, ingenious grandfather, one margarine tub, a mug of seawater in my grand's kitchen, suddenly, it was like he'd opened the tequila and put on Barry White. Suddenly, oh yeah, little Winkle feet were pattering everywhere. And he had to publish this, he had to report this, and the scientific community, they recreated it. So sure enough, genuinely in papers, they have, amongst their materials and methods was, margarine tub was used as a breeding substrate for Winkles. What are you going to do? So, I mean, yeah, that was my grandfather's big contribution to science. And the fact that he also, well, his other contribution was he, for some reason, could distinguish 3 different subspecies of Winkles. I can tell you're on the edge of your seat about this. But, of course, you'd think, okay, when you discover a new species, you get to name them. A great and glorious honor. A chance to, do something like, I don't know, name it after your 3 children, I don't know, or something, or, Aramis, Athos, and Porthos, anything. What did he call them? A, B, and C. I kid you not. Yes. I mean, a whole missed opportunity, Batman. Even when I was an undergrad and I created a strain of bacteria, I called it YMCA1, right? I knew what I was doing from the get-go. He was a veteran, that's what he did. A, B, C. Yeah, if you find a bee Winkle, yeah, you know who's responsible for that. Anyway, but enough about my grandfather. Let's move on to my favorite topic, me. So, at parties, of which I don't attend as many as I'd like, then people will ask me, so, what do you do? And in the past, I would say, I work with genetics, or I work with cloning, more accurately. And every single person at these parties would say, ooh, can you clone me? It's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's almost as if I'm cloning people to ask me that question. And everyone thinks, oh, I'm so original, I'm going to ask if you can clone me. I bet he hasn't heard that one before. I have. And so I actually had to change the script. I had to alter my whole thing, that when people ask, so what is it you do? Then I would say, I work in genetics, in inherited diseases. And that's already, blowing up the conversation, but then they rally. They hope, okay, maybe it's an embarrassing genetic condition like compulsive flatulence syndrome. And so they ask, ooh, what genetic disease? And I say, it causes intellectual disability in children. There are precisely 0 jokes about that. But bizarrely, one Halloween, my wife and I were invited to a party. Not you gentlemen, the lady behind you is my wife. In fact, we went to a Halloween party and I was talking to a Harley Quinn wannabe and I told her the whole I work on genetic disease, yada yada yada. It causes intellectual disability in children. It's like, all children? I said, no, only boy children. And she laughed. It's like, dude, okay, she's got her priorities. But anyway, in order to investigate this more appropriately, because, you know, if you start experimenting on children, they throw around terms like war criminal and psychopath. And so instead, what do? We instead recreate these mutations in fruit flies, which a few of my colleagues are actually in the audience and can testify to this topic. And we introduce these mutations, we recreate them in fruit flies. And I know the question that is suddenly popping into your heads is, well, fruit flies aren't exactly intellectual titans. So how do you tell if a fruit fly is mentally handicapped? And you may scoff, but these are questions we actually had to ask. And so we had to figure out, how do you tell if a fruit fly is dumb? I mean, I'm talking like hillbilly dumb. And the answer is surprisingly straightforward, because fruit flies in nature, if they hear a loud noise, they're gonna go, ooh, something's trying to eat me, stop. But then, if they hear a loud noise again and nothing is trying to eat them, then they'll realize, oh, false alarm, and go on their way, right? So, not exactly it isn't a crossword puzzle, but still, these flies can't learn that. So every single time they hear a loud noise, they're like, whoa, bloody hell, and freeze. And so this is how we actually test how we manage to make intellectually disabled flies. But it's not like we're manually going like clap next to the fly. That would be weird and it wouldn't be very scientific. We play them a recording of scary noises and then record their movements. Anyway, but in addition to that, we've actually managed to make these mice as well, carrying the same mutation. And these mice are also not the sharpest tools in the shed. But at least the mice, you know, they go through mazes, they do all that. But get this, these mice are actually autistic as well, potentially. But unlike, you know, regular autistic humans, it's not like these mice are alphabetizing their shoes or only eating raspberry yogurt on a Tuesday while Thomas the Tank Engine is on the TV. So, but astonishingly, you can actually characterize autistic behavior in mice. But, you know, courtesy of that strange orange buffoon who's in the building that is white, then he would have us believe that, hey, all you need to do to become autistic is have some aspirin. It's like, oh my, do you know how many thousands of crowns we could have saved if we just followed his advice? Yeah, I mean, forget, you know, sort of genetics, forget, you know, microinjection, forget all that. Just, you know, pop a couple of aspirin into the water bottle, boop, autistic mice? No, really, just no. I mean, sorry to our American friends, but no. And similarly, RFK Jr., that madman who's also friends with the orange one, he would have us believe, oh, also, being circumcised carries a risk of autism. It's like, what the actual hell? And I actually had to ask ChatGPT, is it possible to circumcise a mouse? And the answer is no. And even if it was, we wouldn't. Because do you have any idea how much the paperwork would be to actually get permission to try and circumcise a mouse? The answer is Titanic. Where was I? Oh, now I remember where I was. Is also circling back to our intellectual fruit flies, because this is a little nugget of scientific randomness that genuinely was published, is fruit flies, when they're sexually frustrated, resort to alcoholism. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, process that sentence, because it's a lot. That basically some clearly bored scientists actually managed to get funding to investigate. They took group A of male fruit flies and gave them access to some very fetching female fruit flies. And then they took the female fruit flies away. But then group B were male fruit flies who were having their own little fly sausage party. No ladies. And then they offered them a choice. Would you like sugar water or sugar water with alcohol in it? And amazingly, the ones that had not just had access to some fine fruit fly ladies went straight for the booze. And they published this. And when I told my wife this wonderful little chestnut of scientific excellence, her response was, "Are you telling me you're part fruit fly?" Anyway, that has been quite enough for me. Thank you so much.
Further back, give us a round of applause.